I watched Liberty Chick's video as to why she did not support the troops. I also watched a number of her other videos and one done by her husband Alex. Those other videos were one about the Confessions of a Neocon, the other was about gun rights, and the one by Alex was his analysis of the Occupy Wall Street movement. One thing that makes America a great country is that we are allowed to have a free market of ideas. Liberty Chick seems to have a large number of detractors. Some question her chastity, some express a desire for her to leave the country, some express a desire to do physical harm to her, up to and including her death, and after her death they would choose to have her experience eternal damnation. The main dispute between her and her detractors seems to be a confusion over what is a necessary condition and what is a sufficient condition. The detractors are correct that having a military is a necessary condition for freedom. We live in a world where you can only be free to do what you want when you want if it doesn't interfere with others, or in the event that your desires are to do things that no one else objects to. It is not clear as to what Liberty Chick is advocating, but if it is to shut down the whole military because people, or is to shut down the whole military, a lot more people would die than are currently being killed by the American military. I do not have contacts with the higher levels of the Israeli government. If our military stopped propping up the state of Israel, it would eventually have 6 million Jews be overrun by 300 million Arabs. When that event occurred, Israel would launch a nuclear strike on probably every Arab city, and that would kill millions of people. That would be considerably more than are now being killed by the American military. However, Liberty Chick is correct that having military is not a sufficient condition for freedom. If you look through most of history, most people were not free. If you look at the governments throughout most of history, they used either the military or an institution that looked a lot like the military to suppress their people. If people are given a choice between security and freedom, the vast majority will opt for security. The responses to Liberty Chick's video indicate that her detractors are all people who seem to be for people having rights until they are exercised. I think it was H. Rap Brown who originally said that in America you can say anything you want as long as no one is listening. Most of her detractors also seem to be associated with people who are in the military or the detractors are from the military. That would tend to indicate that there must be something besides the military to allow us to be relatively free. My own view is that running a totalitarian state is very expensive and inefficient, and the people who run the country can get enough compliance that they don't have to resort to totalitarian measures. I would not want to be the comprehensive auto insurance company that would insure her vehicle in the event that she put on her "I do not support the troops" bumper sticker. I do agree with Liberty Chick that the United States had no business invading Iraq. At one time, the Bush administration got 70% of the population to believe that somehow Saddam Hussein had something to do with the 9/11 incident. Saddam Hussein was a combination of Al Capone and Joseph Stalin. In Iraq, if you were a threat to Saddam Hussein, or you could become a threat, you were executed. He liked to live well, he was a billionaire, and he wanted to pass the business on to his children. Even if he had weapons of mass destruction, he would not have handed them off to Al-Qaeda. If he did such a thing, one submarine in the Indian Ocean could eliminate every Iraqi city before breakfast. Neither Iraq nor Al-Qaeda nor Afghanistan had the logistical capabilities of occupying any part of the United States. With a simple search of YouTube, I was able to find two speeches given by Dick Cheney in the early 90s. In both of those, he answered the question of why didn't the United States finish off Saddam Hussein after the first Gulf War. The reason he gave was that the United States did not want to get into a mess that was just like the mess we got into after we invaded Iraq in the second Gulf War. My nephew is in the Army, and in the July of 2001 he was supposed to learn how to jump out of helicopters. However, they did not have that training exercise because the helicopters were already being shipped to the Mideast. When 9/11 occurred, Al-Qaeda represented a clear and present danger to the United States. They had bases in Afghanistan. We asked Afghanistan to let us in to get them. Afghanistan refused, so we went into Afghanistan to take out the Al-Qaeda bases. An interesting question is, what would have happened had the Al-Qaeda bases been 70 miles from Beijing, and we asked the Chinese to turn them over or let us get them, and the Chinese refused. After we destroyed the bases, we should have offered to help Afghanistan rebuild. If they wanted us to stay, we should have helped them. If they didn't want us to stay, we should have left and told them that if they let Al-Qaeda back in, we will be back and we will put herbicides on their poppy fields. Most people in Afghanistan have no clue as to why we are there, and they view us as another in a long series of occupiers. The only thing we are currently accomplishing in Afghanistan is we are giving opportunities to our troops to have their legs blown off. Apparently, Liberty Chick's response to our troops is to not send them care packages, not to kiss their behinds, not to applaud them, and not to talk to them. I would hope that our troops are made of sterner stuff, that behavior would not have an effect on them. Liberty Chick is correct that our military is doing the bidding of a number of large corporations. After 9/11, George Bush said we were attacked by Al-Qaeda because they don't like us because we have freedom. If we left the Middle East, Al-Qaeda could not care less as to what we did. They essentially want to establish a country that is run by Sharia law that would go from Morocco to India and maybe throw in Bangladesh and Indonesia. I would have felt better had, when we invaded Iraq, George Bush would have said, we are doing so to take the Iraqi oil and also send a message to everyone else in the region that in the event they give us grief over the price or availability of oil, they are next. Liberty Check announces she is opposed to nationalism and blind patriotism. This is unusual because her brilliant Alex in the Occupy Wall Street video indicates that he is for American exceptionalism, which is another form of nationalism and blind patriotism. In her gun video, she believes that everyone should be allowed to have guns, including 2-year-olds and felons. Guns can be used for a variety of purposes, one of those being self-defense. I do not think Liberty Chick denies anyone the right of self-defense. I think the United States has a right to defend itself. The way countries defend themselves is by having a military. A legitimate reason for joining the military could be to be a part of the defense of this country. The United States does spend more on its military than about the next 17 or so nations spend on their military. If you look at the world, there are not a whole lot of countries that pose a threat to the United States proper. There is questions about Iran and them doing things such as blocking the Straits of Hormuz. However, they do not present a current threat to the soil of the United States. There are terrorist organizations, but you don't fight them with our current military establishment. If the terrorists made arrangements to have a shootout somewhere, that would be very easily handled and there would be no more problem. I do agree with Liberty Chick that running around the world and killing people and destroying property makes us less safe. If I was in charge of the recruitment for Al-Qaeda, I would have sent a thank you note to George Bush for invading Iraq. The central problem with her position is that she limits her reasons for people joining the military to 3. Those being the people are really dumb, they are evil, or they are morally compromised. First, there is the question of people joining the military because they are really dumb. She indicates that people have access to information at their fingertips. Although the internet does make information more available, it does not make the business of figuring out what is really going on any easier. This position is really interesting after viewing her Confessions of a Neocon video. Apparently the scales fell off her eyes about the war in Iraq when, as a part of her college Republican function, she saw George Bush give a speech on the need for the bailouts. That would have been in 2008. The internet was up and running long before 2008. If not realizing things about the war in Iraq, which is now over, and Afghanistan, where wrong requires one to be really dumb, then a Liberty Chick is really dumb. Second, there is a question of evil people getting into the military. She suggested that the United States military would be the perfect place for a serial killer to find employment. She cites the case of James Barker. James Barker raped, killed, and burned the body of a girl in Iraq. For this conduct, James Barker received 90 years in prison. For career military people, there are incentives to move up in the hierarchy. If people under you screw up, even if you couldn't have done nothing to prevent it, it is on your record. If two captains were up for the same promotion and their qualifications were essentially the same, then the one who did not have James Barker under him would get the promotion. She did skip the Abu Ghraib prison. A lot of the problem there was that there were a bunch of poorly educated people who were not trained to do what they were asked to do. A lot of what Liberty Chick might consider evil is part of the human condition. There was an experiment conducted at Stanford University in 1971 with regards to college students acting as prisoners and guards in a simulated prison setting. The experiment went real bad, real quick, and had to be canceled. If you look at what the conditions of the troops are in Afghanistan and Iraq, it is surprising that more incidents did not occur. She also cited the case of the Collateral Murder video. It is difficult to get your troops up for combat if you do not dehumanize the enemy before you send them into combat. It is my understanding that no charges were brought out of the incident that gave rise to the Collateral Murder video. If one of the people who were killed in that video was not a photographer for Reuters News Service, it most likely would have been just like the case of Rodney King would have been another black person resisting arrest had it not been videotaped. The Geneva Convention requires that people involved in combat have to wear uniforms. Unfortunately, the people fighting our troops in Iraq did not observe this convention. Journalists were supposed to wear vests identifying them as journalists. The photographer who was killed in the Collateral Murder video did not have on such a vest. 2 children were injured in the incident. One has to question the wisdom of someone who would bring children to where a firefight was taking place. Additionally, the group of people that were shot up had at least one AK-47 and one rocket-propelled grenade launcher. The helicopters were called in because our troops were being shot at by small arms fire, which also would have included AK-47s. Our troops do not use AK-47s. To claim they hold AK-47s to the heads of 5-year-olds is false. The Collateral Murder tape actually proves the opposite of what Liberty Chick was trying to prove. She claims that our military is an evil organization bent on killing innocent civilians. If it was a procedure to commit acts of genocide against Iraqi civilians, the pilot and gunner would have had merely said, "There are some Iraqis," and then blown them away. Liberty Check suggests a third reason for people joining the military, that being that they are morally compromised. Liberty Check suggests that 51% of our taxes go to support the military. I would suggest that the number is actually closer to 16%. However, she also admits to paying those taxes. So in fact she is supporting the troops. Unless she wants to be morally compromised when she does her taxes, she should figure out the prorated part that goes to the military and refuse to pay that amount. During the war with Mexico in 1846, Henry David Thoreau refused to pay his taxes to support that war. He was put in prison or in jail for about 1 day. Ralph Waldo Emerson came to visit him and asked him why he was in jail for not paying his taxes. Henry David Thoreau asked Ralph Waldo Emerson that he was disappointed that Ralph Waldo Emerson wasn't in jail for not paying the taxes. In a better world, there would be no need for troops. Unfortunately, the world we live in requires troops to protect us. Equally unfortunately, the troops that are necessary to protect us can do horrible things in our name. If people like George Bush use them to further the ends of certain moneyed interests, bad things will happen. The current administration is not a whole lot better.